Kennedy is the manager of the Career Service, and she's agreed to do the chat for us. So thank you very much, Caroline, for that. And she'll be dropping in lots of resources to share throughout the chat. So make sure you do download those as we're going along, because I'm not sure actually if you can access them afterwards. So do get ready to download any of them. We can always post them anyway on a separate document. So we're going to get started straight away. So I'll start with the first question. And Helen, I'm going to address this one to you. So this one is, I am from the 2020 January intake. Should we start applying for jobs from now, or do we have to wait? It's an international, coming from an international student.
Okay, sorry, I'm just unmuting myself there. Orla, can I just ask, are you recording the session?
Oh, good. Well done.
I made that mistake last night.
Okay, great. I'm going to start. Oh, sorry, somebody is recording it because it says stop recording. So Caroline must have thought of it. Is that right?
Okay.
I just started there a moment ago.
Good girl.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Mel. Do you want me to repeat that question, Helen? Are you okay?
I'm okay. No, absolutely. So
okay.
I think the question was, I'm a January 20 start student, and when should I start applying for jobs? So I'm assuming this is an international student, because most of the programs that start in January 20 are the full-time students are international. We do have obviously part-time students who are on the Springboard programs. So to address the international question first, I suppose I'd say the first thing you need to think about is, when are you available for work? Okay, and it's really important that you understand your visa situation. So the visa that you have arrived in Ireland with, or got when you arrived to Ireland, was your Stamp 2 visa, and it allows you to work 20 hours a week most of the year, and for a short period between June and September to work full-time. So unfortunately for you guys who started in January 20, you're going to have to be in college full-time between June and September. So even though your visa allows you to do that, the requirements of your course don't allow you to do that. So when should you start applying for jobs? You will be likely, providing you successfully complete your program of study in December, and you do your exams and pass your thesis, you will get results in early February that you've successfully completed your studies, and then you can go to the GNIB office and apply for your 1G visa. And that can usually take 5 or 6 weeks, depending on when you can get an appointment. Okay, so when should you start applying for jobs? Most Irish employers are probably only keen to talk to international students when they nearly have their 1G visa or have it. So I would say, a couple of months, 2 or 3 months before you're due to get that 1G visa is a good time to start applying. There's one exception. If you see a position advertised, typically maybe a graduate program, that's not starting until March 2021, but it's advertised now. Absolutely apply for it. But if you see positions that are advertised now, generally speaking, they're going to be looking for someone to start in the next couple of months. And unfortunately, you're not available because of the visa. So I hope that answers the question. And maybe if there's any further questions, you put them into the chat and I'll address them. Obviously for Irish EU students, you have no restrictions regarding visa. So whenever you're available for work, you've finished your studies, or maybe you're studying part-time, you can apply and work full-time while you're studying part-time. So it's not really an issue for Irish EU students, but it is an issue if you're on a Stamp 2 visa. You're on mute, Orla.
That's great, Helen. Thanks very much. You're our resident expert on these visas, so I'm not going to be going to anybody else on that particular question. We're going to move on to the next one. So please, students, if you have anything that you want to follow up on what Helen answered there, please drop it into the chat. So our next question then I'm going to go straight on to is about, should I go straight into a master's? Now that's a very kind of broad and open question, so I'm just going to answer what I'm might say to my students, in general, basically, there are a number of variables that could surround this particular question. It'll depend on the course that the student is on, it will depend on the student's own circumstances, and it will depend on basically what the jobs market is like out there. So it's a very, very broad question. But if it is just generally, should I go on and do a master's after doing an undergrad, generally employers would prefer work experience over a master's. So if there's any possibility of getting into a work placement first before you go on and decide to do a master's, that would be the ideal scenario. However, if, for instance, I would be dealing with a lot of career changers. So if there is a student who is doing a postgrad in data analytics and they have zero experience in data analytics from before, I would be suggesting that it might be a good idea for them to go on and do the masters. They are covered through the Springboard programme funding-wise for the postgrad, but not for the masters. But it's only a top-up that you would have to pay for the masters, which is about $2,500, as compared to the fee of $8,000 in general, or $12,000, whatever it is for a master's. So, so in that circumstances, I might say it because you want to show high competency for roles like a data scientist, and so I'd be saying maybe a master's is a good idea. But I think in general, and I'm going to revert to Jennifer for the rest of this. Jennifer, what would you say to a student who came to you with that kind of a question?
Yes, so I think it really depends on what you're studying. From the business side of it anyways, there is definitely, as Ola said, to repeat, employers do oftentimes prefer experience. For some particular areas, having a master's doesn't necessarily ensure that you get paid any more. It might mean that you have a slight edge in terms of applications. What I would say, though, is that there are areas like HR where it is really important for employers that you are doing a master's, because the master's will give you the CIPD recognition. So if you are studying business or HR from an undergraduate perspective, doing that master's and getting that extra qualification can really help. It'd be really similar in finance as well. If you want to go off and do a master's, either to get some more exemptions on your exams, that could be really good, or say you want to go into fintech and there's a specific master's that allows you to do that kind of transition between an accounting degree and a finance technology degree. There'd be other areas, say for marketing, for instance, where it might be helpful to do a master's if, again, you want to specialize in something. So say you want to go into advertising, where maybe you'll get an internship opportunity by going to a technological college by doing that, or say you want to specialize in digital marketing. So having the master's in those specific areas might really help. A lot of the courses in Smurfit are excellent. They give you really good employer contacts. They're very practical in terms of projects. Again, you'd be going to do the master's for a very specific reason. So like Ola said, I think that there's a huge variety of reasons why you might or might not. If you're in a business course, really do think specifically about, well, what is this master's going to get you? Because they are expensive to do. And oftentimes employers, if they're looking at somebody with an undergrad versus just an extra year in college, it isn't necessarily a whole lot more. But if you are doing it to specialize in a particular area or to gain a specific set of skills, especially from a technology perspective, that can be very valuable. If you do have any questions about that, though, I would say talk to your careers advisor individually, because they definitely will be able to help you make that decision.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And I think Caroline has dropped in there a very useful document, which would help you to make a decision about whether to go on and pursue a master's. So you can download that, students, if you find that useful. Just to revert to you, Helen, for just a quick second, you deal with final year students. What do you normally advise the final year undergrad students about that?
Well, again, it's a little bit similar to what Jen and yourself have been saying. I suppose, again, employers, I think, value experience over a master's. Mm-hmm. However, if you don't have a job lined up immediately and you've graduated, it might be something you'd consider, especially now with the COVID, and maybe we will have some bit of a recession. Hopefully it won't last too long. So in that instance, if you haven't got a job and there's a master's available that you're interested in, I definitely would consider that. And I suppose just to alert, if there are any undergraduate students here at the moment, the college are now offering 50% reduction in fees for NCI students who've completed an undergraduate programme at level 8 in the last 5 years, can go on and take up a master's in a full-time programme at 50% fees. So that can be quite attractive to some students. However, if you were on a SUSI grant, it mightn't be so attractive. So I suppose it's about weighing up what your options are for the immediate future. You know, if you think you're going to have an opportunity for employment, or you're in the process of a recruitment process, maybe you put it on hold. If you haven't had much luck, you know, I certainly would think about considering it and maybe using those resources or exploring it with your careers advisor, what would be the right masters for you at this point.
That's great, Helen. Thank you very much. And I see that Caroline has her hand up there. Caroline,
Great.
did you have? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have 2 questions in. One I'm just asking for clarification for, but the other one somebody has asked, should we create personal websites for showing projects, or is GitHub and LinkedIn enough?
So I know there's a number of us here who deal with technology students in particular. So is there anybody who'd like to just jump in?
I don't mind taking that. I think you should do whatever you think will showcase your skills. So GitHub is great for code. I've come across situations where the employers have said to me, I don't want to see any CVs, just tell the students send their GitHub account. Yeah. I've seen some really good websites. So I think you've got to remember that if you're in the job market, you need to have a sales document for yourself. And if that's a website and you're really good at it, absolutely go for it. If it's not, that's not your forte, but you're good at code and you have a GitHub account. So you always play to your strengths and see how you can advertise yourself as best you can.
That's great. Great.
Do you have anything to add to that, Siobhan?
You're on mute, Siobhan.
The only thing I would add to that is just if you are going with the GitHub, just watch the presentation of it. You know, we've seen a lot of GitHubs where people put up content but don't necessarily organize it in a manageable manner for organizations. So they have to be able to navigate, you know, where the different projects are. It has to be in a very systematic way. So they're not kind of going into your GitHub account and trying to figure out where you have stuff stored. So just the presentation again is key to any application.
Yeah, I just maybe I don't work in the tech side of this, but I did work in recruitment for a while where we did hire people, you know, who would be sharing these things. And I think this has been said a couple of times, but it's just really important. If you want to present something, do it on the platform that you can present it best in. And if you're unsure about making a website or you don't know how to structure your content in GitHub, don't make a mess of trying to do something because you think employers will want it. It will only reflect poorly on you, because if they open those external links, you're immediately showcasing your work and showcasing weaknesses. So if the most that you feel like you can manage to display well is through a LinkedIn profile, stick with that and then progress to the next thing. But don't try and have 5 or 6 different sites and accounts that are all mediocre. We would much rather see one very clean profile somewhere, because it is such a turn off for any manager if they just see a mess.
Yes, okay, so to be careful not to do yourself any injustice by trying to create a website that maybe is not the best, really. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. Caroline, are we okay, or will we stick with the questions that we have for students, or do you think there's something there?
Would I give you one more, because there's a few starting to come in, and then so one chap has asked that he's getting contacted by recruiters through LinkedIn, but the jobs are contract based and he's on a student visa, and he's wondering, I suppose, why they're contacting him and how he should deal with it. Now, I suppose what he doesn't say is how clear is he on his LinkedIn profile about when he's available for work, but I'll leave that with you.
Okay, can I start with that one?
Yes, Helen, I think you're...
yeah, I'm not sure, well, it is an international student. I'm not sure if it's a tech student or a business student, but I suppose, you know, you've got to remember, you know, recruiters on LinkedIn are fishing for CVs and for good candidates. And so maybe you have a really good LinkedIn profile that has skills that he's looking to fill a position, you know, with someone with those skills. So they will reach out to you. They may not have noticed your Stamp 2 visa, but, you know, I would say for international students, you know, just be careful around external recruiters. You know, your best if you can to not sign up with a half a dozen external recruiters. You know, Irish employers typically, if they want to hire an international student with a 1G visa, I think they're more inclined to approach the colleges directly rather than have to pay an external recruiter. So I think if it were me and I was getting contacted by recruiters, I'd tell them, listen, I'd love to talk to you when I have my 1G. Can I get back on you? Keep their details, connect with them, and keep your options open. You know, you don't want to be sharing your CV with lots of different recruiters and have them all sending your CV in for different jobs. So it is a kind of a process, I think, and maybe Jen will have another insight on this, is that, you know, you need to manage your relationship with external recruiters, you know, and you need to be able to negotiate with them. Who are they sending your CVs to, that they let you know when they're sending your CV. You might want to apply directly to the company and have the company avoid whatever the recruitment agent's fee is. So that would be my view. Build a relationship with the recruiter, say thanks a million. I'd love to get in touch with you when I have my 1G. And, you know, and with regard to the contract role, you know, like that's obviously a different question. It depends on the length of the contract and whether you're in a position to take up the contract, you know, or whether it suits you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jennifer, I don't know if you want to come in.
I think Helen covered most of that really from a recruiting perspective. I think so. Something that would just be sort of general advice, I suppose, for anyone who does get contacted by a recruiter on LinkedIn is, right, firstly, have a look at the company that they're working for. Figure out, is this a company that specializes in maybe hiring data analysts, right? So is this a specialized recruitment firm, or is this a general recruitment firm that maybe has people kind of fishing for loads of different areas? You will be more successful in the long run with recruitment agencies who are specialized into what you want to do. So even just in terms of deciding how much you want to build that relationship with the recruiter, understanding the company that they work for and the types of clients that they have will be really important to help informing that decision as well. It's also worth going and looking at that recruiter's LinkedIn profile. A lot of recruiters might get recommendations by their previous clients that they've placed in companies, and they will actually write those recommendations on LinkedIn. So if you are an international student, something that's really good to do is go on and see, has that recruiter actually placed international students on visas in companies before? Are there any recommendations on there that indicate that this is somebody who is likely to actually place you in a position in a company, or are they not? So it's really important to kind of figure these things out. I guess, as Helen said, absolutely always respond, always be polite, but be really careful about sending your own information, and don't put all of your eggs in your basket and think, great, a recruiter's contacted me, I'm now going to get a job. That really isn't how it works. So do a bit of research on them before you decide to commit to them or engage further. And I think, you know, that's a really good starting point. In terms of the contract length, I really wouldn't stress too much about that. I think a lot of companies do have policies where they hire people on short-term contracts, and generally what will happen is that they'll hire you on a 6-month contract and then they'll extend that contract into a permanent position. It really just depends on how the business runs with their budgets. Sometimes they might be in the middle of a financial year where they can't actually approve a full-time position or something like that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that contract length, because oftentimes that can just be a business thing that over time will just sort itself out.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jennifer and Helen. We have a very important question that I'm sure is going to be on a lot of people's minds. So the next question is, when will companies start hiring again? And I think I've seen a couple of things there in the chat which might relate to this question as well. So I'm going to revert to Siobhan on this, who works a lot. Well, we all work with employers, but Siobhan does work placement. And then I'll go over to you then, Jennifer, as well. So Siobhan, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, the $1 million question at the moment is, you know, when are companies going to start hiring again? I think we're in a period of transition. We recognise definitely that the market is challenging. It has changed. Companies' predictions have changed. We acknowledge that it is hard to predict. And we just have to bear with it and ride the storm. And what does that mean, really? It means, doing the best that you can while the companies are, maybe not advertising. So one thing I was thinking about is, we don't know yet. Is it more contract? Are we going to see more contracts coming on board? Are we going to see kind of short-term contract, long-term contracts? We don't know how COVID is going to play out. But I do think an important word in all of this is networking, and important words, I should say, are networking and upskilling. So preparing yourself for when they do come on board. So take the focus off, checking the websites every 5 minutes to see if a company is advertising, and checking LinkedIn, and thinking about what you can do when they actually do eventually kind of advertise. So we have an event happening, a webinar happening on the 16th of July, for example, and we have 3 companies coming to a webinar to speak to students about, giving students an opportunity to ask recruiters these questions. And one of the companies coming on board is Dell, and they don't have any open opportunities at the moment for graduates, but they will have. So it's about kind of joining webinars and getting the information you need before the job goes live, and preparing yourself. Upskilling. So maybe you weren't so happy with your results in a programming module. Are you spending the time, now upskilling and practicing that coding? They don't want you to necessarily practice another programming language. What they do want is for you to know a specific language really well. And so it's really about kind of, maybe if you have a CV already done, taking out your CV and say, how have I expanded on this in this kind of downturn, and how you can add value during this time, be it upskilling, be it networking, talk to people, talk to family and friends, join webinars, talk to anybody and get insight. I mean, you're more likely to get that information through your own network than you are through, a jobs board or a recruitment agency. So it's about, having these conversations with people, and they may be able to tell you what the pipeline is like in companies. But we are reaching out to companies all the time. The companies that are recruiting, we are asking them to come live and do an event. So we had 2 events in the college yesterday. One was for business, a company recruiting for psychologists, I think, or for psychology students. And we had another company looking for graduates in the area of software development. So there were 2 live podcasts that happened yesterday. So what I would say is join these podcasts, even if you don't have the visa yet or are not looking. Find out what employers are saying, find out what employers are looking for. And just these little nuggets of information will help you build on your experience and build on what you can offer in the future.
And also to watch what, thanks Siobhan for that, Caroline has just put up there about the weekly newsletter. I mean, that's a good measure of what's happening in the jobs market, don't you think? We're going to see what graduate programs are on that. So if you keep an eye on that, you're going to see exactly what employers are active. Also on our LinkedIn, any of our LinkedIn posts will usually talk about if there's any employers who are employing at the moment, who are hiring at the moment. So just keep your eyes peeled, as Siobhan says, on the market, because nobody really knows what the exact situation is going to be. Is there anything? Yes, Jennifer.
Sorry. Yeah, so just, I think, something that Siobhan said a few times there was networking, and something that we saw the last time that there was a recession and a downturn in the market was that actually a lot of Irish SMEs started to come up, and they were some of the first ones to get that support from government to start building again. They were the ones starting to look at hiring a couple of people. So Siobhan mentioned that actually, sometimes it's not going to be the job board, so they're the ones that find you the jobs. It's that networking and going out to the people that who might be working in these smaller companies who do have just that one job that can come up because they're looking for somebody in marketing, or they need someone to help get their business online. So they need somebody who works, who's got those IT skills. So oftentimes it is really just about keeping your head to the ground, thinking about, like, actually, you know, over 90% of businesses in Ireland are actually SMEs. So it isn't just the big companies that you need to be thinking about who might be holding off on jobs, but there's all of those other companies that might just have one job here and one job there. And that's where, again, as everybody said, keeping out an eye on those newsletters, coming to these webinars, finding different sources of information and keeping in touch with your network, because somebody might just have that one job that's available and they're happy to take a graduate because it's affordable. They might get a bit of funding from it, from something like Enterprise Ireland. And that's really where, in these types of times, those opportunities are going to come from.
Yeah, and just remember that question, you know, that might be asked at interview when they do start hiring is, what did you do during lockdown? You know, so do stay active and be proactive, upskill wherever you can, and be prepared for when they do start hiring. That's really our message to a lot of our students here. And always over the last few months, that's what we've been telling students. So I'm going to move on to our next question, unless, Caroline, you have something you want to drop in there.
No, do you know what? I think go for a few questions and then I'll drop some in if that's okay.
That's fine.
There is a few 1G ones, but maybe, yeah, there's one or two other ones there, and you go ahead. Thank you.
So the next question, I was just wondering, at what stage of the job process would an applicant disclose that they have a disability, example, a physical disability, so not necessarily physical disability, but a disability. So as we all know, there is legislation in Ireland that prevents an employer from discriminating against somebody with a disability. Okay, that's the very first thing that we should say here. After that, it's really down to the candidate. So the candidate, when are they comfortable disclosing that they have a disability? When I'm talking to students, I would actually be saying to them that it's not at the CV stage, because I think because of that discrimination law, it means that employers will be judging your CV on the basis of your merit and what you have to offer to do the role that they're advertising for. And if you're called for interview, maybe it is at that point that really that you should be thinking about disclosing your disability. So it is usually, it's at the stage when you need support, and that's AHEAD is a company or an organisation that give advice to people with disabilities about how to go about accessing both services and employment. And Caroline has a AHEAD booklet there that she's going to drop in a link to into the chat there. So really, I would be saying that at the interview stage, when maybe the employer has to actually come up with some accommodations for you in order to be able to carry out the interview. And then after that, it would be a question of how accommodations can be made if you secured the job. But I just want to maybe go to Siobhan on this, just about the specialist turn who we've been dealing with. And then I'm going to go to you, Jennifer, on that particular thing about from a recruiter's point of view. Siobhan, can you give us a bit more information on specialist turn?
Yeah, so Specialist Turn are a new enough organisation. They basically recruit for their recruitment agency that recruit for individuals that are on the autism spectrum. And we have been working very closely with them over the past year, where they've engaged with our students in helping them to prepare for interview. Now, they don't necessarily kind of match a student with a job, but they are in a position to prepare you to be in the best position to get a job. So you may have to identify the job yourself, but they've been working quite well with students. I'm dealing with the third year students that look for work placements in their third year, but at the moment they're working with a group of 8 students and 8 students who have either autism, Asperger's, dyspraxia, dyslexia, or ADHD. And it works very, very well. And we actually had a case last year where a student was successful in identifying a position through them. And he's still there on work placement at the moment. So they very much kind of, help you to kind of build on your confidence, give you some interview tips, talk to you about kind of workplace etiquette. and give you some advice on disclosure as well. So it's very much that kind of one-to-one approach. As they're online at the moment, they're doing 1 hour, I think it's 45 minutes or 1 hour every Thursday for 8 weeks. So what I would say to you is you will see the emails coming around from your careers advisor at certain times of the year, probably 2 or 3 times a year. And if you're in a situation where you do want to engage with them, it's a good idea because they can offer you that one-to-one support. It's over 8 weeks and it's for 45 minutes to 1 hour.
Okay, great, Siobhan. Thank you for that. And that is for people with a non-physical disability, if you like. So it's to do with autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia. There is an organisation called WAM. I think it's Willing Able Mentoring, it's called. And they do help candidates to get into employment as well. They try to make it easier. And they also work with the employer to help the employer come up with accommodations for students who might need it regarding physical disabilities. So from a recruiter perspective, Jennifer, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, so I think I was just thinking of one example actually when I was running a graduate program, and one of the candidates, she actually got the job in the end, but she almost didn't get it because she didn't tell me as the HR recruiter that she had dyslexia. So during the interview process, you can come up against a lot of different assessments. So they can be online testing, it could be maybe putting a presentation together, reading data, you know, and then drawing conclusions from it, presenting back to people. You might have to physically go into a building, stand up and prepare something. There might be all these sort of requirements throughout an assessment centre process, right? So I think it is important to let HR know once your application has really gone beyond the stage of them saying, yep, we like your CV and we'd like to invite you to that first stage. If you think that in any way, whatever disability, and it doesn't matter whether you have very mild dyslexia or severe dyslexia, if you think that this could interfere in your ability to get through an assessment, I would absolutely say it to the person in HR. So the example that I was thinking of was this particular individual ended up having to put together a presentation based on a large set of data, which was formatted in a PDF. And she had dyslexia, and that particular format actually made it very difficult for her to read it and therefore to then compile it and analyze it and present it back accurately. Unfortunately, she didn't tell me that she had that dyslexia, so we didn't make any accommodation to provide that information in a format that would be easier for her to read and still have an equal opportunity at presenting back. So when she presented back, she got some of the figures backwards, she got a few things incorrect, and it was only after the interview in a follow-up phone call that she said, well, actually, I do have dyslexia, so some of that was really difficult for me to read. Ultimately, we did give her the job, but it would have made that process for her so much more accessible if I had known that in advance, and it would have been a very simple job for me to just find a new way of sending her something that would have been easy for her to do, and then she could have had the best opportunity at going to the next stage of that interview process. So I would definitely just consider that from a physical disability standpoint. If you do have to go into an interview somewhere or physically go somewhere, definitely tell the person, you know, I have this, I need to come in a wheelchair, I might come in crutches, I could be slower at getting between different rooms than other people. That might be a problem as well in an assessment centre situation. Let them know that, because they can definitely accommodate so that you're not on the ground floor for half an hour and then you have to go up to the 4th floor for the next thing and then back down again to the ground floor. So there's all these things that employers can do to make it easier for you. So definitely have a think about that. The HR team absolutely is not there to discriminate against you in any way. They're there to make sure that you have a fair and equal assessment, and then to make sure that whatever assessment the managers have decided on, that they're providing that to you in a fair way.
That's great, Jennifer. Lots of information there for everybody, and it's all recorded there. So if anybody needs to look back on it, that's great. Caroline, you had your hand up. Is there a question coming in?
Oh, yes, please. I have about 5 questions, and they're all fairly similar. So somebody is saying I'm stuck in my home country due to personal issues, and I hope to come back to Ireland in October. How will the market be? And how will I get my 1G? But along a similar line, we've kind of dealt with the market question, but I'm an MSc, you know, I have a graduate job role beginning in August, but his thesis doesn't end until the end of September. When would he get, these are Helen's favourite questions, when would he get a government appointment? And then somebody else is saying as well that a lot of the graduate opportunities are to start in July and August, but they won't be they won't have finished their exam. So I might leave that with you.
Thanks, Caroline. Great. You got a lot of questions in there that we might be able to pull together. Helen, what do you think?
Okay, so the question about there was a lot of questions there, sorry. The question about, I have an offer of a job in August, and I'm not finishing my thesis until the end of September. My advice would be to be really upfront with the employer, okay? You are allowed work full-time on your student visa between 1st of June and the 30th of September. Come the 1st of October, you are not allowed to work full-time. Okay, so if you're only submitting your thesis on the 30th of September, that will have to be marked. In fact, I'm wondering, would you be submitting your thesis on the 30th of August? It would be the normal time frame for the college. Yeah. That will have to be marked and reviewed. Now, your supervisor may have told you, oh, you're going to pass your thesis, but that's not official until the external exam board has sat and has officially approved your thesis. So the results typically in NCI for people submitting their thesis at the end of August or maybe early September is around the 6th of October. And a week later, you will be able to get your official transcript from the exams office, and you will be able to go and have your appointment. Now, there's a couple of tricky things you need to manage. One is, if you have a job offer, you need to tell the employer that for the first 2 weeks in October, you may not have a 1G visa. If you have an offer, I would highly recommend that you try and get onto the INNIS office, and I believe they are open now and they're taking phone calls, and that you try and make an appointment for as close as possible to the 13th of October. Okay, and you will get your 1G visa on the day that you go in, provided you have a transcript. But just bear in mind, what if you don't pass your thesis? Okay, so, you know, then there won't be any 1G visa, or possibly will be if you exit with a postgraduate diploma, but I don't want to complicate the situation. But you need to tell the employer. So that was one question. I hope I've answered it. And the second one about graduate programs starting in July.
August, yeah.
Okay, so graduate programs that are starting in July typically have made all their offers last September or maybe in February. So if you have an offer of a graduate program to start in July, I'd be saying exactly the same thing. When will you have your 1G visa? And you need to talk to the employer. Okay, employers will not hire you if you have not got an official work permit. If it's a graduate program, it's likely to be a large company. They'll understand the 1G visas. So, you know, typically if it was an EY or Citibank or Accenture, any of those companies totally understand the 1G visa. So you need to talk to them. Okay, I've had one situation in the past where a student told a smaller company that they had their 1G visa, they were finished in August and they could work from the 1st of September. And lo and behold, unfortunately, they failed in a module, and it ended up that the student was fired because they had misled the employer. So my advice always is just to be upfront. Yeah, you know, there will be other graduate offers. If they're not prepared to take you, they might be prepared to wait. Who knows? But you have to talk to them.
Okay, thank you, Helen. I just see somebody, Emmanuel, has his hand up there. And really, I'd just ask Emmanuel, if you just drop your question into the chat there, and Caroline will manage all the questions, if that's okay. Thank you for your question. Okay, so can we move on then to the next question that was submitted earlier on? I am a third-year computing international student currently undertaking my 6-month work placement. And they have a few questions. Now, this is it good to do a master's straight after the bachelors? Kind of a question. So, Helen, that's another one for you. And I don't know if we've already answered that. Currently undertaking my 6th. I don't know what the question is, actually. I am in third year.
I'll just come in, Orla, there. We probably have answered the whole thing about should you choose a master's. But I suppose for an international student who's an undergraduate student, they have a few other issues to consider. Obviously, you want to choose the right master's. So on your student visa, as an undergraduate student, the maximum length of time you can be on a student visa is 7 years. So I don't know the student's circumstances. Maybe they came to Ireland for a year to study English or whatever. So you need to count up how many years you've been in Ireland. with your undergraduate degree, you will be entitled to a 1-year 1G visa, okay? If you go on and do a master's, you will not get a 2-year 1G visa with your master's program then. So you cannot have 3 years of 1G visa is basically what I'm saying. So it might make sense if you don't have a job offer to consider going ahead straight away and doing the master's and taking the 2-year visa. It's more attractive to an employer to have someone coming in for 2 years on a 1G visa than 1 year. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about that. Something else came into my head now and it's just slipped. Oh, yeah, you need to bear in mind the number of years you're in Ireland in total. You know, so with a master's, it's 8 years that you can be here on a student visa. Now, bearing in mind as well that a lot of employers do convert students who get employment initially on the 1G visa and successfully complete 6-month or 12-month probation. A lot of employers do want to keep you if you're successful in the role, and they will roll it over into a critical skills visa. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, that's great, Helen. Thank you very much for that. And there's a poll. Caroline's just put in a poll there, and we'd just like your feedback on this session. It will inform whether we're going to have other sessions like this for students in NCI. So we'd appreciate your feedback there. It's in the chat. Next question then, how to start networking? Can we just connect with people on LinkedIn? How to network? Anything other than generic advice is much appreciated after 500 applications. So this student has had sent out 500 applications. So they're just wondering how to go about the whole networking thing. So Siobhan, can I go to you on that, and then Helen and Jennifer?
Yeah, this is a student we'd actually like to speak to one-on-one, really. So I would recommend that this student contact their careers advisor, because I think we'd have a lot of questions just to ask around, you know, are you applying with a generic CV? Are you keeping a log of who you're applying to? You know, are you sending your CV in multiple times to the same company, the same person? And just really kind of, you know, we would recommend that you tailor your approach for every application and just stop applying at the moment. That we need to really look at this and assess what is happening. If you haven't mentioned if you've been called for interviews just based on those 500 applications, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had with your careers advisor. I think you do need to tailor your approach.
Yeah, so I'm just conscious of the time now, so I'll ask Helen and Jennifer maybe to come in and just briefly give your input on that particular question. Thank you.
Okay, so, well, I suppose, you know, we've talked in a previous webinar about the importance of networking, and, you know, I'd recommend that anybody, given we're short on time, that you go back and have a look on the Career Create Moodle at the networking webinar. Networking in Ireland is essential for when you're actually seeking employment opportunities. And, you know, you need to be thinking laterally about who's in your network and building relationships. And that's absolutely, I always say this, and any students that I've met will know I say this, it's never, ever, ever about asking for a job or even asking for a referral for an interview. It's something that's much more subtle than that. So, you know, it's like just building a relationship, asking for advice, seeing what you can do for the other person, talking to them about the challenges you're facing without asking for anything. And, you know, building relationships, I think most people know themselves when people come to you asking for things. You know, it's how they do it actually makes a big difference in how you respond. So I think you should treat networking like that. And I suppose, given I do see that the time is short, and general other advice, that's what I would recommend. Go back and listen to the networking webinar.
Yeah, and I'm just going to attach another question onto that, which is, what are the best practices for searching for a job, particularly ones that you don't have the experience in? I usually use LinkedIn when searching, but feel like I should probably explore other avenues too, but I'm never sure which is best. So that particular student, I think, is a Springboard student, and we're going to be having a webinar next week for Springboard students and some other students with advice coming from somebody who worked for 7 years in LinkedIn, and that's going to be on next Tuesday. So it's other ways to use LinkedIn, not necessarily just using LinkedIn to look in the job section, but also to use LinkedIn to portray yourself in your profile, and also to reach out to people, to build your connections and build those relationships with people, so that when job opportunities do come up, that you're right there in the front. So I see that Caroline, I'm sorry, Jennifer, unless you have something burning that you want to add into, was it you, Jennifer, we're going to answer that question? No, yeah.
The only thing that I was going to say, the question I think was like, do you just connect with anybody on LinkedIn? And the answer I would say to that is no, don't do that. I would probably try and find a reason why you're connecting with them, because you need to establish that relationship. One practical way of maybe thinking about doing this is maybe joining a LinkedIn group and starting to engage in those conversations, and then you can send somebody a request. Again, I think we've talked about this in some of our videos previously, but don't send out blind connection requests. That isn't building relationships. So find something that you have in common and something that you can contribute, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. And go back to the Career Create. If any students want to have a look at any of those videos in Career Create, the links are still up there, and there's a lot of, I see that Caroline has dropped in some there to the chat. Okay, Caroline, you have your hand up there.
Yes, I see another question here asking, if we have work experience, can we still apply for graduate programs?
Yes.
Okay, Jennifer?
Yeah, the short answer for that is yes. I would say that you need to be thinking, how much experience do I have? If you've maybe had a year's experience between an undergrad and then going to do your master's, then absolutely that is totally fine. If you've maybe done your undergrad, you then worked for 6 years in a graduate level role and are doing your master's as a top up to what you've already worked in, then a graduate level role probably isn't really for you. And the reality of this, and I have said this to so many applicants that have applied through my graduate programs before, is that they will be bored in the job. If you have 6 years of work experience and you are applying for a graduate level position, you will be bored by week 2. I guarantee you will be bored. The salary will not meet your expectations. The progression rate will not meet your expectations. The role will not work out for you or the employer. So don't think of it as, oh, the employer doesn't want me. Think of it as you are literally not going to want that employer after about a month's time. So yeah, if you've got 1 or 2 years of work experience between doing things, or you're kind of career changing, then absolutely graduate programs are fine. If you are coming with a lot of experience, I'd really be thinking about a different type of role.
Okay, that's great, Jennifer. Thanks for that. I have a question here that came in, and it's just a little bit long, but I'm currently in a permanent position in a customer service role, and I'm wondering how best for me to transition into an IT role. Do we recommend that you leave a full-time permanent position for an intern job? This sounds like a risky option, but maybe inevitable. From what I can see online, junior IT roles seem pretty rare, and some experience would be required to be considered. So I know that for a lot of my students who are career changers, that is a question that has come up a number of times. And I always start, so it will depend again on the candidate, their situation on the jobs market, and a lot of other variables. So I would definitely recommend that you speak one-on-one with your careers advisor if you haven't already. And what I do say to students is, number one is to start with the employment that you're in at the moment, because there may be opportunities within there to be able to transition into a role, and they have already got experience of you, and you might have a good relationship with your manager, that if you try that first, the very first thing that you start. After that, then it is a matter of looking around and seeing what it is that you what are your circumstances? Are your circumstances are that we never would recommend that you leave a permanent job to go for an intern role. None of us would say that. It is totally your decision as to what you do and what your circumstances are, and whether you would be able to do something like that. But because there would be a drop, and that's what you're referring to. You're referring to the fact that there would be a drop in salary, and you might be in accommodation in Dublin, and accommodation in Dublin is hugely expensive, so it's not viable for you. So we would never say that you should leave a permanent job. So it is something that you need to look at with regard to your circumstances, and then to go and look on LinkedIn and see what kind of skills skills you will need to be able to go for more experienced roles. So what experiences do you have from the past that would be transferable into a role in IT? So in customer service, obviously you have communication skills would be very important. It might be a technical communications role, so you have a lot of technical knowledge. The course that you're on currently is giving you the hands-on technical experience. So play up your projects and make sure that those projects, you are showing them in the best possible light, showing that you have very good skills in this area and competency, and that you have good results. So all of those things might help you to get into a more substantial role than an internship. And there is a difference between, I think, internship and graduate, you know, so you may be able to go for a graduate role if circumstances allow you. But again, that would be in conversation with your careers advisor. Caroline has her hand up there again, but I just want to see if anybody wants to come. Oh, right, there's a great article Caroline has put up there on transitioning careers. So I would recommend that whoever asked that question maybe go into that article. Anyone want to add briefly to that? Okay. So shall we move on then to the next question? What are the best, I think I combined that with another one. Types of roles for MSc in management. So that's a question from a student. And I'm going to hand this over to Jennifer, but I do have some kind of indication of the kind of roles that students have got in the past. So in the 2018 cohort of Masters in management, we had somebody in digital right operations agent, in Accenture, we had CPL, a content operator, Infosys, a financial analyst, JD Wetherspoons, a team leader, Keeling Soft Foods team lead. In 2019, there was ESB, KPMG, State Street, AXA, Shannon, all in roles like client solutions executive, sales associate, brand ambassador, data analyst in integrity, audit graduate program, manager of partner ecosystem. So huge variety there, as you can see. So I'm going to hand over to Jennifer to answer that kind of question of what type of roles would somebody get with an MSc in management.
Yeah, so I think Ola's just named a lot of roles and a lot of different types of companies there. So really showcasing the variety of places that this degree can take you. I think this is very similar. If you're doing the international business, it's a very similar type of degree that will give you an edge over somebody who's maybe just done a regular business degree, right? So it's kind of giving you a little bit more experience. I think the most important thing, and I would say that this is applicable for anybody doing a general business degree, whether that's a BA or a master's, is that it is really important that you try and figure out what area of business you've really enjoyed throughout that process. So is it that you'd like to go into marketing or finance or HR or sales or business development? I have talked to so many graduates, thankfully none from NCI, who have said, I am doing my master's in international business and I'd really like to be a manager. And you ask them a manager of which team, and they can't even tell you what department they would like to be running. So there are no jobs in the real world of just being a manager or being an international business manager. That is not a thing. What is a thing, though, is finding a role in something that you've particularly enjoyed, where that management experience and that broader business experience, once you're in that company, even 6 months where you're starting to have to say, okay, well, now maybe I'm really interested in the audit side of things. And because I've done my MSc in management, I feel a lot more comfortable auditing an HR team. I feel quite comfortable auditing a finance team. And that is where that extra level of experience is going to come in. But it is really important that before you go for any of these jobs, you've had a think about what is it that you're passionate about. If you're unsure about how to do this, Karina did some amazing videos on career planning. There's a great webinar that you can, or a session that you can look up as well. And if you're a bit stuck, I definitely say go talk to your careers advisor and also have a look at these things that help you identify where your strengths are and what function within a business you would be best suited for.
Great, thanks very much, Jennifer. That's great. Caroline, any other questions there? We have come to the end of the questions that were submitted beforehand, which is great. I wasn't sure if we were going to get through all of those. So if there are any ones that are burning there, you're very welcome to. We will try and answer them here. We've another 5 minutes before we stop recording or before we end the session.
Well, there was one question in earlier, just with a lady asking about references, and she was wondering, I think she's from India, and she was saying how many references, and I said 2, and then the person was wondering whether or not they would give an employer in Ireland or England. So in my chat, I suggested that I would give a reference in your home country if it was relevant work. But I just thought, you know what, Helen deals an awful lot with the international market. So I thought it might be good just to, what do employers like, Helen, do you think?
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Yeah, I think if you have relevant work, I'd absolutely agree. And your employer is from India. Your previous employer was from India. I definitely would use that as a reference. Sometimes, like, references are tricky enough, really. If you have an Irish employer, if you've had a part-time job, right, and you're an international student and you've had a part-time job in Spar or anywhere like that, the manager there might be able to give you a reference with a view to, you know, you were great to work with on the team, you worked hard, you turned up on time, you knew how to perform and work. And that could be the second reference. Often students ask me, will I provide them with a reference? Okay, and really the only reference as a careers advisor that I'm in a position to give is one to say, look, if I've met Promote 5 times, I was his careers advisor, he attended all my classes if he did. I've met him, I found him very pleasant, and he's really interested in his career, and he did attend the college between such a date and such a date. And I'm very happy to do that, as are, I think, the international office, very happy to offer an indication of when you were here. But then what happens is sometimes that's perfect for the recruiter. It's a tick-boxing exercise. Other times I will get a big, long 3-page form and ask to fill out, what would you like to work with? You know, did I ever have to discipline you? And a whole pile. I've put a couple of samples of the reference templates I get, just to show you that how much sometimes the people giving you the reference needs to know you. So I would say, if you're still in college, you need to be thinking now, who will I use as my referee when the time comes? You know, it might be your thesis supervisor if you get on with them. If you don't, you definitely won't be using them. It could be me if I was, or any of the careers team, if it's just a matter of letting someone know that you did attend the college, or your part-time job, or if you have experience from India, or maybe even an academic supervisor from your home country. So it's a mix, you know.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, when I used to do these reference checks, and it will absolutely depend on the company, what the company is looking for. If the company is asking for something, so sometimes they might say, we'd like an academic reference and we'd also like an employer reference, and they might be specific about what they're looking for. So I think whoever was asking this question was saying, you know, should I use my reference from the UK or one from Ireland? It is worth thinking about who have you know, what is the employer actually looking for? And it's okay to ask them that as well when the time for reference checks comes, and say, and ask them, do you want a reference from my previous work experience, or is a reference from my part-time job in Ireland okay as well? And they will be clear about that, because they will know exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm. Great. Could I just encourage people, because we're just coming to the end, we've just got 1 minute left to do that poll that Caroline's put up in the chat there, just to put in whether you found this session helpful. It's really useful to us to know whether this is something that you would like in the future. So please would encourage you to fill in that poll. I don't know if we can post it again. I'm not sure, actually, Caroline, whether that can happen, but because we're just getting used to polls here in the careers team.
Yeah, I can't see a way to repost it, so I think they may have to scroll back up through the chat. Okay. Sorry, guys.
Not too far. It's not too far up the chat. It's actually only a little bit up. So yeah, would really find that helpful. Okay. Okay, so Caroline, any other questions there, or does anyone have anything they would like to add? Well, we don't have time, so we're going to be saying goodbye, but we will be doing something like this again, so do look out. And that 16th of July is going to be an important one with Dell for those people who had questions about whether companies are hiring, so do join us for that. We hope to have other ones in between times, so we're constantly asking any employers who come to us with their roles to maybe come on and do webinars. So always check our LinkedIn's, because that's where we will be, and your emails. They will be the two places where you will definitely hear of any events like that. So keep an eye out, keep your eyes peeled. But thank you all so much for joining us. It was great to have your questions, to make it very proactive and interactive. So we look forward to speaking with you again, and just to say goodbye from Helen, Siobhan, Caroline, Jennifer, and myself. And thank you for joining us. Goodbye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, I've stopped the recording.